It wasn't the words, "do not admit," that punched me in the gut. It was the fact that someone had printed my photo, my face, and handed it to a rent-a-cop like I was a threat. Like I was some deranged ex or uninvited lunatic about to crash a stranger's wedding. But it was my daughter's wedding. My adopted daughter. The one who used to call me Dada in her sleep. The one who held my hand through her first stitches. The one who picked out the suit I was wearing that day. I'd parked 2 blocks down because I knew the venue would be crowded. She always said I walked like an old man with too many secrets in his pockets. So I walked slower than usual, taking in the ridiculous string quartet, the floral arch they probably overpaid for, and the guests sipping champagne like they were extras in a Netflix drama. I didn't expect a red carpet. I didn't expect a thank you speech. I didn't even expect to sit front row. But I did expect to be let in. Instead, this guy, buzz cut, sunglasses, built like a vending machine, holds up a clipboard like it's a holy relic. "Sir, name?" I smile politely. "Daniel, Rachel's father." He flips a page, scans, then pauses. That little pause? That's when my stomach dropped. He lifts the clipboard, shows me my own face. There it is. My driver's license photo. Blown up, highlighted in red ink, and the words, typed, not scribbled, "do not admit." Is this a joke? I ask, try not to laugh. He shakes his head, utterly unfazed. "I have strict instructions, sir." Strict instructions. I repeat, like I'm testing the words in my mouth. From who? The bride. I can't say. Can't or won't, I don't know. I stand there for maybe 5 seconds longer than I should have. Part of me expected someone, her, Monica, even one of the Groom'S family, to run out and say, "Wait, that's her dad." But nothing. Just the quiet flutter of overpriced petals on the breeze and the soft clink of forks inside the tent. I nodded once, turned around, and walked back down the gravel path. I didn't say a word, didn't make a scene, didn't break anything, or cry, or beg. I opened my car, sat down, and stared at the steering wheel for a full minute before even turning the key. And then, only then, did the hurt start to sting. Not the kind that screams. The kind that settles into your bones. The kind that says, "She didn't forget. She erased you." I drove home in silence. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call anyone. I just parked in the driveway of the house I paid for, where I raised her, funded every field trip, paid for therapy when her real dad bailed, listened to her cry after college rejections, and walked her through FAFSA because her mom was too busy. I walked inside, hung up the jacket she had chosen for me. I didn't even loosen the tie. I stood in the hallway, staring at the row of frames on the wall. Her graduation, her first piano recital, that trip to Denver when we got caught in a hailstorm, and she asked if I'd still love her if she turned into an icicle. I stood there for a long, long time. And here's the part that's probably hard to understand. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow. She made sure I saw that photo. That label. Do not admit. Not invited. Not please don't come. Do not admit. Like I was the shame she needed to bury before marrying into money. And if you've made it this far, let me just say, more than 90% of you who watch or listen never hit that subscribe button. But if this story gets to you, if you've ever been written out of someone's life after giving them everything, hit subscribe. It helps the team tell more stories like this, and maybe help someone feel a little less alone. Back in my living room, I poured a drink. Just one. Then I opened the cabinet where I keep the old papers, the adoption certificate, the life insurance policy, and at the very bottom, the folder with one name in bold. Irrevocable Trust, Rachel. She'd forgotten I had it. But I hadn't. The whiskey burned more than usual that night. Not because it was cheap, it wasn't, but because it was earned. The kind of drink you reserve for nights when the world reminds you just how replaceable you really are. The living room was dim. I didn't bother turning on more than a single lamp. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt surgical, like someone had reached in and carved out 22 years of my life and left nothing but stitches. I walked over to the bookshelf, not looking for anything in particular, but my eyes always land in the same places when I'm trying not to feel something. There's a drawing in a plastic frame. Crayon. Lopsided hearts. Stick figures. In shaky handwriting. Me and my dad. She couldn't even spell dad back then. It came out as dad. I left it that way. Next to that, kindergarten photo day. Her pigtails looked like antennas. Prom night. She wore sneakers under the dress because I told her to never wear pain for other people's expectations. College graduation. She made me wear that stupid oversized hat just for laughs. And now I had a security guard and a clipboard telling me I didn't exist. I took another sip and pulled the ottoman closer to the bookshelf. At the very bottom was a leather-bound photo album she gave me when she turned 16. For the man who stayed, it said on the front. I'd never shown it to anyone. Not her mom. Not my brother. Not even her. It was our thing. Our shared history. Funny thing, every photo in that album had my hands in it. Holding her up on a bike. Catching her during a trust fall exercise at camp. High-fiving her when she passed her driving test. Holding up her acceptance letter. Even in the candid ones, you could see them. My hands. Always lifting, catching, holding. But apparently, not welcome anymore. I closed the album, stood up slowly, and crossed the room to the safe hidden behind a sliding panel in the hallway. Not many people know it's there. Even fewer know what's inside. Birth certificates, medical proxies, life insurance policies. One envelope from my late father I still haven't opened. And one thick blue folder with her name embossed in gold. Rachel Lynn Harper, Irrevocable Trust. Set up in her junior year of college. She'd just gotten out of that awful relationship with the wannabe artist who thought open relationships were deep. She was wrecked. Thought no one would ever really love her. I remember sitting in the car with her in the university parking lot as she sobbed into her hoodie. She said, I just want to feel safe for once, Dad. So I made it official. Created a trust that would guarantee she'd never need anyone's charity, including mine. College loans. Paid. Grad school. Covered. First condo. Signed over in her name. She cried when I handed her the documents. And now, suddenly, I was the one standing outside her new life like a stranger with bad intentions. But here's the thing she forgot, and maybe her mother forgot too. Irrevocable doesn't mean untouchable. It means strategic. The structure of the trust gave her full benefit of the assets. But, and this is the part Monica conveniently never paid attention to, any act deemed willfully injurious to the grantor opens a revision clause. Especially if it occurs before the marital milestone that officially severs dependency. Translation, if she crosses a line before she's legally married, I'm not obligated to keep the faucet running. And a security guard with my photo plastered across a clipboard? That's not just disrespect. It's deliberate erasure. I leaned back in my chair, folder open on my lap, and flipped through the original trustee documents. The ink had faded, but my notes in the margins hadn't. I always annotated everything like a professor on the edge of paranoia. Little arrows, legal interpretations, even a red tab next to something called Section 7B. Monica never asked what that section meant. Rachel didn't either. But I remember exactly what my lawyer said when we wrote it up. If this clause is ever used, it means she's chosen a new family. And they can have the financial responsibility, too. It wasn't meant as a threat. It was meant as a boundary. And now? Now it felt like a lit fuse. I closed the folder gently and locked it back inside the safe. Not out of fear. Out of timing. I wasn't going to retaliate. Not yet. That would be emotional. This needed to be surgical. Because sometimes, the best way to be heard is to say absolutely nothing and wait for the silence to do the talking. Where's her dad? That's what a woman in a red fascinator whispered behind her hand to the man beside her as the music played softly under the tent canopy. It wasn't loud. Barely audible over the clinking glasses and faux laughter. But Charles heard it. Charles always heard the things no one wanted said aloud. He stood near the back of the ceremony aisle, arms crossed behind his back like he was analyzing a merger, not attending his only son's wedding. His expression was unreadable, his default setting. But his eyes were sharp, scanning, absorbing, processing. He hadn't built his empire by trusting surface-level smiles. The first thing that caught his attention was the guard. Not just a security guard, but a private firm guy. Earpiece, clipboard, mirrored sunglasses even in the shade. A hired wall of silence. Strange for a wedding of this size. Even stranger that the groom's father hadn't been informed. He leaned slightly toward the groom's mother, Marion. Did you know they hired security? She blinked. No, I thought you did. He didn't respond. Just made a small note to himself. Red flag number 1. Then came the second. The empty chair in the front row, stage right. Family side. It wasn't just empty. It was clearly meant for someone important. A single white rose rested on the seat. Charles had attended enough of these to know that wasn't a tribute. It was a placeholder. A last-minute apology to a guest who'd mysteriously vanished. Rachel, the bride, stood at the far end of the tent, smiling stiffly for photos as her makeup artist blotted away sweat with clinical urgency. Charles studied her body language. Tense. Distracted. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She wasn't glowing. She was managing. Something was off. Then Monica emerged, all champagne and nerves, doing what she did best. offering cover stories wrapped in a bow of plausible denial. He's sick, she told one guest. He had a last-minute work conflict, she told another. He's watching on a stream, she added with a chuckle to the photographer. Too many versions. Too fast. A rookie mistake. Charles watched Monica like he'd watched competitors pitch half-truths across a boardroom. She was smooth, but not smart. He caught her eye once. She raised a glass, smiled too wide. He didn't return it. Instead, he walked calmly to the side garden, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Elaine, he said to his assistant. Bride's last name is Harper. Her mother's Monica. I want everything. Full background. Real time. You have 4 hours. Elaine didn't ask why. Elaine never asked why. Charles slipped the phone back into his jacket and returned to the venue, but he didn't rejoin the guests. He stood just near the tent's entrance, watching the guard, clipboard still in hand. Every guest was waved through casually. Except, Charles noticed, the clipboard had 3 pages. Thick. Far too thick for a wedding list of fewer than 100. He made his way over. Excuse me, he said, voice even but authoritative. The guard straightened. Sir, you work for the venue or the family? The family. Which side? The guard hesitated. Brides. Charles nodded once. Who authorized your assignment? I was contracted through Vanguard Event Security. All instructions came from the bride's mother. Did they give you specific targets? The guard didn't answer immediately. Charles stepped in a fraction closer. I'm not asking as a guest. I'm asking as someone who will own part of that security firm by Monday, if I feel like it. The guard blinked. One individual was flagged. Denied access. Who? I can't say. Did the man try to enter? The guard hesitated again. Yes. Briefly. Charles's jaw twitched. And he left. Peacefully. Charles stared at him. What did he look like? The guard's eyes flicked down, as if remembering. Tall. Gray hair. Black suit. Looked like he might have been her father, honestly. Charles didn't say anything. Just turned and walked back inside the tent. He no longer saw a wedding. He saw a deal with concealed terms. And he never signed deals without reading the footnotes. In that moment, he didn't know exactly what Monica had done, but he knew one thing for certain. Something was rotting under the surface, and he'd built his life on digging that rot out before it spread. He sat down slowly in his chair, glanced once more at the empty seat meant for the father of the bride, then tapped a short note into his phone. Trust activity. Bride's side. Watch transactions. Pull legal records. Then he looked up, smiled for a photo, and waited. Because truth has a nasty habit of showing up, especially when you don't invite the one person who could have kept the lie from collapsing. The documents arrived as a secured PDF in Charles's inbox precisely 1 hour and 42 minutes after his call. Elaine never missed a deadline. She could have been making nuclear codes disappear for all he knew. Her background was murky and expensive, which is exactly how Charles liked it. He opened the file while sitting in the groom's lounge. The noise of the wedding buzzed outside the double doors, muffled laughter, clinking glass, the violinist over-practicing Pachelbel's canon like his life depended on it. None of it mattered. What mattered was on the screen. First, Rachel Harper. No biological father listed on the birth certificate. Not unusual. He's seen that before. What struck him was the next section, a legal adoption finalized in 2003. The adoptive father? One Daniel Harper. Same last name. Same man who, per the facial recognition tool Elaine ran on venue security footage, had been denied entry at the gate just 3 hours ago. Second, education history. Tuition for the University of Illinois, both undergrad and graduate school, paid in full from a private 529 fund. Owner, Daniel Harper. Charles scrolled further. Apartment leases, co-signed by Daniel. Credit card co-signer on her first Amex. A vehicle title. A dental surgery claim covered by his insurance policy. Even the venue they were standing in, booked under a business account registered to Harper Design and Property Solutions, LLC. Principal agent, Daniel Harper. Third, the kicker. An irrevocable trust, filed 3 years ago. Beneficiary, Rachel Lynn Harper. Originating funds, Daniel Harper. But then he opened the guest list. No Daniel Harper. No father of the bride. No seating assigned for anyone with his last name. Family table had 3 names. Monica, Rachel's godmother, and her cousin. He opened the family itinerary Monica had submitted to the planner. All RSVPs cross-checked. All hotels booked. One notable name excluded across all logistics. It wasn't an oversight. It was a purge. Charles leaned back, lips pressed together. This wasn't some divorce mess. This wasn't a we don't talk much anymore story. This was a deliberate redaction. They had carved the man out like an appendix, removed for being inconvenient. And he had footed the bill for most of it. Charles knew men like Daniel. Quiet, methodical, low-drama types who did the heavy lifting in life without ever demanding a spotlight. But those were also the men people underestimated the most, until it cost them. He clicked through 2 more tabs. Monica's recent credit movements. A sudden uptick in spending 6 months ago, bridal services, venue deposits, designer fittings. All timed exactly with the trust's last disbursement. Elaine had flagged it. He checked the dates against the event calendar. Every deposit Monica made came within 24 hours of a fund transfer from the trust. His eyes narrowed. Rachel didn't just use her father's name. She used his money. And now she was marrying into a family with money of its own. Thinking, maybe, that the old one could just be shelved like a forgotten donor plaque. Charles exhaled through his nose and closed the laptop. The signs weren't just disrespectful. They were strategic. This wasn't an accident. It was a campaign. Someone, Monica, most likely, had orchestrated a version of this wedding where the man who laid the financial groundwork for the bride's life didn't even exist. He stood and adjusted his cufflinks. No man builds his life on someone else's foundation without checking the concrete. And this wedding? This whole picture-perfect affair? It was sitting on top of a lie. Charles stepped out of the lounge, passing waiters and florists, all oblivious. He moved like a man on a trading floor, decisive, silent, scanning for opportunity. His next call would not be to Elaine. It would be to his son. And he had one question. Not about the dress. Not about the catering. But about how much the boy really knew about the family he was about to marry into. Charles found Monica alone by the bar, swirling a second glass of Sauvignon Blanc with that curated poise she'd perfected over the years. The kind of woman who made social climbing look like ballet. Hair immaculate. Dress tailored to seem expensive without trying too hard. Laugh calibrated for each guest's tax bracket. She didn't see him coming. Monica, Charles said coolly as he stepped beside her. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the background music like a wire snapping under tension. She turned, startled, then recovered fast. Charles, everything okay? Is the lighting too harsh in the tent? I can talk to the planner. He raised one hand. Why wasn't your husband invited? Monica blinked once. I what? Daniel Harper. Your husband. Rachel's father. The man who paid for this venue. And your daughter's education. And that wine you're drinking. Her throat moved like she'd swallowed something sharp. He's been distant, she said too quickly. We thought it would be less complicated. We? Charles echoed, as if testing the weight of the word. You and Rachel? She hesitated. It's been a tense year. Things got strained. He can be sensitive about. Sensitive, Charles said flatly. Is that the word we're going with? He tilted his head slightly, watching her squirm. You removed him from the guest list, he continued. You signed off on security to bar him from the entrance. You made your daughter's father, the financial spine of this entire day, into a non-person. And you thought no one would notice? Monica's laugh was brittle now. I think this is being blown a little out of proportion. No, Charles interrupted. What's out of proportion is that your entire wedding plan is built on a man's generosity while simultaneously pretending he doesn't exist. Monica went pale. Her hand tightened around the wine glass, knuckles whitening. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but making sure every syllable hit with precision. You don't erase the man who built the foundation and expect the house to stand. That's not just cruel. That's stupid. Her lips parted, maybe to protest, maybe to plead, but he'd already turned and walked away. Mid-sentence. Monica was still standing there, frozen, when Charles stepped out onto the patio and pulled out his phone. The sun had dipped just behind the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn. He scrolled until he found his son's name and hit call. Hey, Dad. His son's voice was upbeat, oblivious. All going well out there. Meet me behind the catering tent, Charles said, his tone cold steel. Now. A pause. Everything okay? Charles didn't repeat himself. He hung up and slipped the phone back into his jacket. There was a storm coming, but it wouldn't be loud. There wouldn't be yelling or slammed doors or champagne flutes shattering against walls. No, this kind of reckoning would move quietly, surgically, and when it hit, it wouldn't just ruin a wedding. It would unravel a story someone had spent years crafting, a fantasy in which one man was disposable, forgotten, left outside the tent with nothing but silence and shame. Charles knew better. He'd built empires by sniffing out rot early, and now he smelled it here, among the floral centerpieces and overpriced hors d'oeuvres. This wasn't about the father of the bride missing. This was about someone removing a keystone from an arch and acting shocked when it all collapsed. It started with a single sentence. This wedding is suspended. Effective immediately. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of the words did the work for him. The officiant's mouth opened slightly mid-prayer. A string quartet faltered mid-note. Someone in the third row gasped audibly. Glass clinked to the ground somewhere behind them. Rachel, standing near the floral arch in her designer gown, lace-trimmed, backless, the one Monica swore would cement the image of elegance, blinked like she'd just come out of anesthesia. "Wait, what?" she said. "What do you mean, suspended?" Charles didn't flinch. Exactly what it sounds like. The groom, his son, Aaron, hadn't moved. His face said he wasn't sure whether this was an intervention, an ambush, or some cruel rehearsal stunt. But Charles wasn't looking at him. He was staring directly at Rachel. "I'd like you, the officiant, and your mother to join me by the side tent. Now." "No," Rachel said, laughing awkwardly. "No, we're not doing this." "What is this?" Monica appeared at her side like she'd been summoned by panic. "Charles, please. This isn't the time. You made time for a security team. You can make time for this," he said flatly. He walked off without waiting for a response. And the strange thing? People followed. Like they instinctively knew this wasn't a joke. This was a verdict being delivered. In the shaded area behind the catering tent, Charles laid everything out on a small folding table. A printout of the guest list, the trust documents, a summary of disbursements, the wedding lease agreements, vendor payment confirmations, all originating from Daniel Harper or Harper Design and Property Solutions. Rachel's name was all over the documents. But Daniel Harper's name was on every check. Monica's complexion was turning the color of her wine. "You used his money for everything," Charles said. "The invitations, the venue, the floral deposit, even the down payment on your condo, Rachel." Rachel's eyes were wide. I didn't know he paid for all of it." "You didn't know?" he repeated. "You signed vendor confirmations under his LLC. Your initials are next to the expense approvals." Rachel's gaze snapped to Monica, who stood frozen, lips pursed so tightly they looked bloodless. "And this," Charles said, sliding one final page across the table, "is the security order. The one instructing venue staff to deny entry to Daniel Harper. Signed by your mother. And initialed by you." Rachel's breath caught. "That's not, I didn't." "It's time-stamped, Rachel. Digitally. Don't insult my intelligence." "I thought it was just for one person," Rachel whispered. "An ex-someone from my mom's side." Charles tapped the initials. "They're yours. You approved this. You signed off on removing the one man who, by every legal and moral standard, built this entire day." Monica stepped forward finally, voice high-pitched and brittle. She didn't understand what she was signing, Charles. It was a planning document. "You don't hide that kind of instruction in a flower budget," he snapped. "You executed a social surgery. You erased the man from the family narrative and thought no one would notice." The officiant stepped back, looking uncomfortable. Rachel's lip was trembling now. Aaron had his hands in his pockets, face unreadable, like a groom waiting for someone to call cut on a movie that suddenly felt unscripted. "I didn't mean to hurt him," Rachel said, voice cracking. Charles's tone turned colder. "You didn't just hurt him. You stole from him. You laundered his love into something transactional. You used his protection, his legacy, and his silence as a tool. And when it was inconvenient, when it didn't match your Pinterest board, you erased him like a typo." Rachel's mascara was already running. Monica stood in stunned silence, her body tilted as if trying to block the documents from view, as though shielding them could change their truth. "I would rather call off this wedding," Charles said slowly, "than let my son marry into a family that treats the people who raised them like receipts to be thrown away." Nobody spoke, and for the first time since the ceremony began, the silence didn't feel festive or sacred. It felt like fallout. The illusion, perfect dress, curated playlist, smiling guests, was cracking. Publicly. Irreversibly. The wedding was no longer a celebration. It had become evidence. Rachel's heels clicked hard against the patio stones as she stormed out from the tent, veil flying behind her like a tattered flag in retreat. Guests parted for her without a word, most too stunned to speak. The DJ had already turned the volume down to a whisper. The violinist had stopped mid-measure and quietly packed up his bow. Outside, under the archway of fairy lights meant for Instagram-perfect first dances, Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled past the group chats, the florist, the planner, the maid of honor. And then she found the name she hadn't used in weeks. "Dad." She tapped call. Straight to voicemail. She cursed softly, then typed instead, "Please come back." I didn't know she did that. I thought the security was for someone else. Please. No read receipt. Just silence. Behind her, Monica followed, face flushed with indignation wrapped in the sheer panic of a PR disaster unraveling in real time. He wouldn't answer, Monica said, breath catching on the edge of a scoff. You know how he is. Always so sensitive. So dramatic. God forbid someone questions him. Suddenly he's a martyr. Rachel turned, eyes red. Mom, stop. No, I won't stop. He's always had this chip on his shoulder like we owed him worship for being the man who stayed. Well, staying doesn't entitle you to control everything. Rachel stared at her mother, the foundation of her entire moral scaffolding suddenly feeling like sand. I asked you to handle the logistics, she said, voice shaking. I didn't ask you to exile him. Monica crossed her arms, regaining her balance like a gymnast on a beam. Don't act like you were blind. You signed every document I gave you. I told you we needed security and discretion. You told me we were protecting against old boyfriends, Rachel whispered. You never said my father. At that moment, Charles stepped onto the patio, his posture precise, calm, composed like a prosecutor stepping back into the courtroom after a short recess. You're still calling him sensitive? He said, his voice colder than the wind cutting through the hedges. Monica turned, face stiff. Excuse me. He's not sensitive, Charles said. He's dignified. Something you two clearly don't understand. Rachel looked at him like a student who just realized she failed a test she thought she'd aced. Charles walked slowly toward her, stopping just short of sympathy. He knew. From the moment he saw that clipboard at the gate. Knew what it meant. Knew who signed off. And he didn't shout, didn't make a scene. He just left. Quietly. Because you, he looked at Rachel now, weren't ready to admit what you'd become. I didn't mean to erase him, Rachel choked out. You didn't have to mean it, Charles said. You just had to let it happen. Monica took a step forward. Charles, this is between our family. No, he cut her off. This is about integrity. And if you had any, you'd be chasing your husband instead of rewriting the story to make yourself the victim. Rachel sagged against the side of the house, bridal dress bunched in her fists, makeup ruined. The photos they'd planned, sunset by the koi pond, champagne toast on the dock, were meaningless now. Her story was no longer hers. The man she had counted on to show up without needing applause had done just that, and then walked away without needing revenge. And somehow that hurt more. Because her mother was wrong. He wasn't being sensitive. He was being gone. The sun had slipped below the tree line by the time the black sedan pulled up outside the venue. Most guests had already fled the awkward silence disguised as a delayed reception. A few lingered in small clusters, sipping warm wine and whispering, eyes darting toward the bride, who now sat alone on a bench near the fountain, dress wrinkled, bouquet discarded like a crumpled napkin beside her. Inside the main hall, Monica was trying to salvage what dignity remained. Her phone buzzed endlessly with questions, relatives asking if they should stay, the planner needing decisions, the caterer requesting direction. She was in the middle of pretending to coordinate a reschedule when the doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a florist or vendor. It was a man in a slate gray suit, hair neatly combed, a black leather briefcase in one hand. He walked with the slow, assured pace of someone who knew he was not welcome, but also knew he couldn't be turned away. Monica Harper? He asked, his tone calm but official. She turned, instantly guarded. Yes. My name is Evan Delaney. I'm legal counsel for the Harper family Irrevocable Trust. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. He opened the briefcase with quiet ceremony, removed a thick envelope, and handed it to her with white-gloved hands. He was that type of lawyer. Precise. Unshakable. This is an official notice of trust freeze, pending an internal ethics review. Effective immediately. Monica opened the envelope, eyes scanning the top line. Her breath caught. What does this mean? She asked, trying to maintain composure. It means, he said, that all current and future disbursements to Rachel Lynn Harper have been paused. Retroactive expenses related to today's event will be audited. Any vendors paid using trust assets may be subject to recourse if fraud, misrepresentation, or manipulation of trustee intent is found. You can't do this. The documents bear your signatures, he replied flatly, and your daughter's initials. Charles stood a few feet behind, arms folded, watching, not smug, just satisfied, like a man who knew the math was finally catching up to the fantasy. This wedding was built on his name, Charles said quietly. His money, his patience, his silence. Monica turned toward him, voice sharp, desperate. He wouldn't really cut off his own daughter. He loved her. Charles raised a brow. And how did you repay that love? Monica's mouth opened, then shut. She clutched the papers to her chest like a life vest made of ink and shame. I can fix this, she muttered. No, Evan replied, already repacking his briefcase. You can't. This isn't about mending feelings. This is about violating fiduciary ethics. The trust wasn't an ATM. It was an agreement. And you, both of you, broke it. Rachel entered the hall just in time to hear the last part. Her steps slowed. She looked at the lawyer, at Charles, then at her mother, who now resembled a woman aging by the second. Is this real? She asked. Charles nodded once. Very. She stared at the envelope in her mother's hands. The same hands that had guided her through hair tutorials, exam jitters, and first boyfriend breakups were now holding the notice that her future, financial and otherwise, was evaporating. This was never your money, Charles said, voice lower now, more surgical. It wasn't a gift. It was a legacy. And legacies aren't inherited, they're earned. Rachel swallowed hard. He won't even talk to me. Because for 20 years, he gave everything without asking for anything. And today, when it was his turn to be included, you gave him a security guard in silence. Outside, the lawyer's car started again. Taillights glowing like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence no one wanted to read. Monica finally sat down, hands trembling slightly, the weight of her choices heavier than the stack of linen-wrapped favors no one would take home. And Charles? He didn't gloat. He didn't posture. He just watched. Because in his world, people who silenced the men who built the foundation always seemed surprised when the building collapsed on top of them. They came at 9:47 p.m. Rachel in the back seat, veil gone, hair unpinned and frizzing, mascara clinging to the corners of her eyes like regret. Monica sat stiffly in the passenger seat, still in the tailored champagne dress she'd picked to compliment the bride without competing. Aaron, the groom, drove. He hadn't said much since Charles pulled him aside and laid it all out like a surgeon reviewing x-rays with a doomed patient. To his credit, he didn't defend her. He didn't even ask for clarification. He just said, I want to see him. And so they came, to the house with the brick mailbox, the wind chimes made of copper pipes Rachel gave him on Father's Day when she was 9, the porch swing they painted together one summer with leftover Sherwin-Williams and a cheap brush from the hardware store. The house where he lived. Not them. Not anymore. The driveway was empty except for his pickup, parked in its usual place beneath the sycamore tree. Lights off. Curtains drawn. Still, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Rachel bolted out first, heels clacking against the pavement. She ran to the door and knocked hard. Then again, louder. Dad? She called, voice cracking. Please, just talk to me. I didn't know she signed it. I didn't know the trust would be frozen. I didn't mean for any of this. Nothing. She rang the bell. Once. Twice. Monica joined her reluctantly, arms folded. Daniel, stop this. You've made your point. Don't humiliate us further. Aaron stood at a distance, near the car, watching like a man at a funeral he never expected to attend. Inside, Daniel sat in the living room with the lights off, a mug of coffee cradled in both hands. Not whiskey, not scotch, just plain black coffee. There was something about the warmth of it, steady, grounding, that felt more powerful than alcohol ever could. His phone buzzed on the side table. One buzz, then another, then a third. He ignored the first two. The third came from Charles. He answered. They're at your door, Charles said calmly. All three, just like I told you they would be. Daniel said nothing. Charles waited a beat, then added, do not answer it. Still silent, Daniel stared across the room at the bookshelf. The one with the framed drawing in crayon, me and Dad. The ink had faded slightly over the years, but the scribbled heart still glowed like a warning flare in the dark. She's sobbing, Charles continued. But make no mistake, this isn't contrition. It's salvage. They're not here to apologize. They're here to rewind. To make it look like today didn't happen. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. Outside, the knocking continued. Please, Dad, Rachel said, voice cracking. I didn't mean it. I didn't know. I never would have let her. Just come out, please. We'll talk. We can fix this. Daniel stood up, walked to the door, and paused. He didn't open it. He didn't press his face to the glass. He just stood there, inches away from the sound of their desperation, hearing Monica hiss under her breath about lawyers and optics, hearing Rachel sob harder, hearing the groom say nothing. And then he walked away, not in anger, not with drama, just with a calm, steady step toward the back of the house where the paperwork sat on the table, neatly stacked. Trust amendments, account closures, foundation charter forms. No lawyers. No courtroom. Just pens and facts. Because the ultimate power wasn't screaming back. It was silence. It was making them live with the unanswered door. With the quiet house. With the reality that no matter how much they begged, manipulated, or explained, they had written him out. And now he'd taken the pen. The morning after the wedding that never happened, the street was quiet. No vendors packing up. No guests drifting to brunch with hangovers and stories. Just stillness. A stale, apologetic kind of silence. Rachel opened the front door of her mother's house in a borrowed sweatshirt and satin pajama pants. Half bride, half orphaned. Her eyes were swollen from sleep or crying or both. Her mother was upstairs pretending to be busy, pretending there was still a second act to stage. At her feet lay a small envelope. No markings. No return address. No stamp. Just her name in neat, familiar handwriting, almost too calm. She knelt slowly, picked it up, and opened it with the kind of reverence reserved for something holy or dangerous. Inside was a photo. She was 5, dressed as a tree in her kindergarten play, green face paint smudged on her cheeks, limbs tucked in around herself like a tight bud. She was asleep on his chest, her face half buried into his suit jacket. He looked younger, hair darker, face tired but proud. One of those rare moments where love is accidentally captured. No posing, no smiling. Just presence. Beneath the photo was a single line, handwritten in blue ink. I was never just the man who paid. I was the man who stayed. No signature. She stood there barefoot on the cold porch, fingers gripping the paper like a lifeline. And then she crumbled. The kind of collapse that doesn't come with wails or slaps to the chest. Just a slow descent to the ground, forehead pressed to the step, as though maybe, just maybe, the concrete could absorb the shame and send back time in return. But time doesn't answer begging. Inside his home, Daniel sat at the dining table, where the morning sun filtered in soft and golden across his papers. No music, no TV, just the sound of a pen gliding across signatures. The document at the top read, Beneficiary Amendment, Harper Trust. He signed it without hesitation. The new beneficiary? Not a person, a foundation. He'd already registered the name that night, in the quiet space after the doorbell stopped ringing. The Stay Project, a nonprofit, for forgotten fathers, for the men who taught daughters to drive, who bandaged knees, who paid for wisdom teeth and clarinets and late-night pizza for exam week, and who were eventually left off the guest list without explanation, for the men whose loyalty was mistaken for servitude. He had no illusions of a movie ending, no belief that she'd come running with apologies or promises or even understanding. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't vengeful. He was done. And somehow, that felt cleaner than rage. On the final page, just above the notary line, he wrote in one extra sentence in the margin, a note not for Rachel, not for Monica, not for the lawyers, just for himself. To be present is not weakness. It is endurance. He set the pen down, closed the folder, and carried it to the safe. As he slid it inside, he noticed the old drawing again. Me and Dad. The stick figures. The misspelled love. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just turned off the light, made a fresh pot of coffee, and sat at the table, alone, but not defeated. Because when the world forgets the man who stayed remembers himself.